Welcome, everyone. This is DA Sports. I'm your host, DASASI. And thank you all for tuning in again. This is episode number 18. Today we have a shorter show for you. We're just going to get into two different groups of topics. For one, since in my last episode I went over my mid-season awards, we're going to recap my predictions based on how they look so far mid-season. So, talk about the predictions I made for the awards and for playoff seeding and compare that to where they look right now. And also, I'm going to talk about in each conference the teams that I predicted most right to where they are now and most wrong to where they are now in terms of playoff seeding. And then lastly, we're going to finish the episode with my picks for this week. Obviously, that includes my pick 3, my lock of the week, and my underdog pick of the week. So let's get into it. Okay, so to start, we got to do a mid-season prediction check. So for those that don't remember my predictions from the beginning of the season, all you have to do is scroll back through my videos and go to episode 1. Midway through episode 1, I do go over my predictions for the NFL season in terms of seeding and for awards. So to start, I'm going to go over the awards. I'm going to tell you who I picked to win certain awards and then basically say where I think they fall right now. This is basically in conjunction with the award finalists that I put in the last episode. I broke down the final candidates that I feel like should be in those positions for each award in the last episode. So if you haven't done so already, please go and check that out. Okay, so first, I did predict for Offensive Rookie of the Year. My preseason prediction was Caleb Williams. Now, it makes sense why I would make that prediction. Caleb was the number 1 overall pick. He was being drafted to a team that made a lot of changes to their roster to give him more weapons. And the general thought was with their schedule that they would be able to make the playoffs. At least in my case, I thought they would be able to sneak into the playoffs as a 7 seed. So if they were to make the playoffs with him being the rookie, I felt like he would be the Rookie of the Year. Obviously, that's not going to happen. Not only do I not think he'll actually be in the top 3, like I said, if you saw the last episode, I did not have him in my top 3 offensive rookies of the year right now, but I do think that the award is going to get won by another starting rookie quarterback, and it's actually the one that was taken after him, which is Jaden Daniels. So Jaden Daniels has essentially done what I expected Caleb Williams to do with essentially less talent. Most people didn't predict that the Commanders would even have a chance at winning the division, and that's what they're doing right now. So I think it's pretty much a lock with Jaden Daniels. I think possibly if the Bears were able to get things turned around, maybe Caleb Williams can sneak into that final 3 of Offensive Rookie of the Year contestants, but I highly doubt it. So I was definitely wrong about that one. Now for Defensive Rookie of the Year, my preseason prediction was Dallas Turner. He is a defensive end currently playing on the Minnesota Vikings. He was selected in the middle of the first round. He was projected before the draft to go early, probably like around 8 or 9, where Atlanta was drafting. He ended up falling all the way to, I believe, 17. That combined with was already on Minnesota's defense. I felt like he was going to have ample opportunity to get after the quarterback. From what I've seen so far, he has done a decent job. I don't have him in my top 3 Defensive Rookie of the Year candidates right now, but I feel like he's not too far behind to where he couldn't make his way into that top 3. Right now, as I mentioned in the last episode, I have Beanie Bishop Jr. leading Defensive Rookie of the Year, but again, I think in this case, it's a little closer than the Offensive Rookie of the Year, so there's technically still a chance, but I wouldn't bet on it at this point. Now, next is Offensive Player of the Year. Now, my preseason prediction of Offensive Player of the Year was Derrick Henry, which looks pretty good. If you saw the last episode, I actually have Derrick Henry second right now for Offensive Player of the Year behind Lamar Jackson. But I definitely think it could go either way because, for example, in terms of MVP race, I have Derrick Henry also second, but above Lamar Jackson. I have him behind Jared Goff. So he could be number one for Offensive Player of the Year right now. He definitely is on pace to put himself in position to win that award. So that one is one of those ones that I could be right on. So far I feel good about that prediction. Now for Defensive Player of the Year, my preseason prediction was Aiden Hutchinson. Now I actually think I was probably right about this one. For those that don't know, Aiden Hutchinson is actually out for the year. I believe he got hurt in game number 6 or 7, somewhere in that range. And he already had 7.5 sacks on the season. So he was definitely in that mix. I believe he's still top 5-ish in sacks in the league, and he's missed the last 2 to 3 games and it's going to be out for the rest of the season. So it's a testament to what kind of track he was on, and considering how well Detroit is playing, I think definitely if he would have stayed healthy, he would have won Defensive Player of the Year, and I would have been right. So unfortunately, he did get injured, so I have no chance of being right, but I definitely think it was a solid prediction. Now for Coach of the Year, my preseason prediction was Dan Campbell. Now, Dan Campbell is in that final 5 list that I put out in last episode for Coach of the Year. Right now, I actually have him 5th, but that's just my opinion. I think I hold a little more weight for some of the coaches that have elevated their team far beyond where I felt like they were expected. But it's not in any way solidified. If Detroit does stay in that number 1 seed in the NFC, it's definitely something that he could end up winning. So I do feel good about that prediction, even though right now I have Andy Reid leading Coach of the Year candidate. Dan Campbell still in the mix, so it's still a solid prediction. And then lastly, I had my MVP pick for the preseason was CJ Stroud. Now, in this pick, I felt good about it early, like the first 3 or 4 weeks. I don't feel that way now. I think Houston's still been playing solid, but there's so many other players that I feel like have been outplaying CJ Stroud and Houston as a whole that I don't even have him in my final 5 right now. So I wouldn't call the prediction a bad pick, but I don't think there's any shot of him actually winning MVP. Obviously, anything's possible. They could get on a roll, but considering the injuries that they're overcoming, I just don't see it happening. So that prediction, not so much. All right, so now I'm going to talk about my playoff preseason predictions. Just briefly, in the sense that I'm going to talk about one right pick and one wrong pick in each conference based on where they look today. So for right now, in terms of the NFC, the pick that I felt like I got the most right was that I did predict that the Lions will be the number 1 seed going into the NFC playoffs. And right now, that's exactly where they are. They're currently 7-1. They not only have the best record in the NFC, they've also beaten some of the other top teams in the NFC. And there's an argument being made that they could even be the best team in the league right now. I have them at number 2, but nonetheless, it's still a fair conversation. So my prediction of them being the number 1 seed was perfect because it looks like that's going to be exactly right. Now, in terms of my most wrong pick in the NFC, unfortunately, I have to say it's the Dallas Cowboys. I predicted that the Cowboys would go into the playoffs as a number 3 seed and win their division. Not only are they not winning their division, they're not even second. They're 3rd place in their division. They're currently 3-5. And we just got news today that Dak's injury from the last game is going to lead to season-ending surgery. So he's out for the year, going to get replaced by Cooper Rush. So as far as I'm concerned, I feel like the Dallas Cowboys are pretty much punting on the season. Now, granted, he could be injured, and that's just what they have to do. But any slim glimmer of hope of the Cowboys actually coming back and winning that division, I think pretty much died with Dak being out for the season. So unfortunately, that pick is terribly wrong. I guess, it had to catch up at one point. They finally got all their stars re-signed except for Micah, but still it looks like it's turned out to be a worse product on the field. And hopefully they make some changes in the next offseason so they can get back to at least their regular season winning ways. Now, in terms of the AFC, I would say my most correct prediction was the Pittsburgh Steelers. I did have the Steelers making it to the playoffs. Granted, I had them making it as a 7 seed. And right now, if the playoffs started today, they'd be the 3 seed because they are leading their division. Now, I still say this is my most correct prediction, even though I also did have the Chiefs high in the playoffs. I had them as the number 2 seed. Right now, they look like they're going to easily be the number 1 seed. The reason why I'd say the Steelers is more of an impressive pick is because most people didn't even think the Steelers would make the playoffs this year. I believe Vegas' over-under for the Steelers was 8.5 for the season, and they already have 6 halfway through the season. So they're definitely on the right track. And even though they are leading the division right now, I do feel like probably by the end of the season, Baltimore will win the division, which will then put the Steelers in around that 7 seed spot where I predicted them before the season. So I'd say that pick is probably the best one out of my picks for the AFC. And then the pick that I got the most wrong from the AFC playoff predictions has to be the Cleveland Browns. I did pick the Cleveland Browns to make the playoffs. I actually thought they would be the 6th seed, and they have no shot of making the playoffs. They are currently 2-7. They're one of the worst records in the entire league. For some idiotic reason, I thought Deshaun Watson was going to be better this year. He wasn't. Then he got hurt. And then also Chubb ended up being injured longer than I expected him to. I thought he'd be back probably around game 3 or 4. He just came back recently, and he still looks like he's pretty rusty, which makes sense coming off a huge injury. But yeah, the Cleveland Browns pretty much have no shot at making the playoffs, so my prediction of them being the 6th seed was terribly wrong. All right, so now we're going to finish this episode by getting into my picks for tomorrow. For those new to the channel, before every Sunday's games, I give you 5 games where I give you my prediction of the winners. It breaks down into 3 different segments: a pick 3, a lock of the week, and an underdog pick of the 3. My pick 3 are 3 teams that I predict to win out of games that I could see going either way. My lock of the week is the team that I pick to win that I feel like is most likely going to win no matter what. And then my underdog pick of the week is a team that I'm predicting to have the best chance of winning, even though they're currently favored to lose by more than 3 points. So let's get into each one. To start, we got to get with my pick 3. So this week in my pick 3, I'm going to start with the Atlanta Falcons. The Atlanta Falcons are going on the road to play the New Orleans Saints. The current spread right now is 3.5. Now, on paper, I would say that this should be an obvious one, but it is a division game, and for some reason, every time the Falcons seem to be favored in a game with another team that's familiar with them, they don't play up to expectations. I believe a couple times this year when I've picked Atlanta in my pick 3, they've actually lost. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen this time. I'm hoping, considering that the Saints are pretty much selling. They just got rid of Marshawn Lattimore, and they got rid of their coach. They've lost 7 straight, I believe. They shouldn't win this game, and Atlanta should be able to roll easily. And Atlanta has looked good in recent weeks, so they should be able to win and cover the spread. We'll see what happens on Sunday, though. The next game in my pick 3, I'm going with the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are playing at home against the Tennessee Titans. The Chargers are currently favored to win by 7.5 points. This one is kind of tricky. I've said it throughout the season. I feel like Tennessee's defense is actually underrated. They're a lot better than people realize, but because their offense has been so putrid, you don't really get to notice it because the defense is always put in bad positions. So I feel like this is one of those games that could run along the same type of situation. I think the game will be close, and then late in the game, the Chargers will pull away, or the Chargers will get out to a big lead and then get kind of reeled in a little bit. So I'm not 100% sure as far as whether or not they'll cover the spread, but I am confident enough that they'll get the win. So that is the second pick out of my pick three. And then lastly, for my pick three, I'm going with the Philadelphia Eagles. They are on the road against the Dallas Cowboys. The Eagles are favored by 7 points. Now, before the season started, I pretty much predicted that these games would probably be back and forth and they would split one. But the way that Philadelphia seems to have been gotten on a roll, seems to be clicking, their defense seems to be playing a lot better. And Dallas is doing the opposite. They're falling apart. Like I mentioned earlier, Dak is going to be out for the season. And Cooper Rush's last game played where he lost was against the Philadelphia Eagles. So I think this is going to be more in the same. I think Dallas is pretty much down and out with all the things that have been going on. Yes, they made a move right before the trade deadline, picking up Mingo from the Panthers. No, I don't think that's going to make any difference whatsoever in terms of their offensive production. So I think that Philadelphia will get the win, and I think they'll cover the spread easily. But because it is a division rivalry game, anything can happen. But I am picking the Philadelphia Eagles to win this game. So now on to my lock of the week. For my lock of the week this week, I'm going with the Minnesota Vikings. The Minnesota Vikings are going on the road to Jacksonville. They are favored by 6.5 right now to beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, I think this is another example, like I predicted last week with Detroit and Tennessee, that this is just a bad stylistic matchup. Yes, Jacksonville has a lot of offensive firepower in terms of like ability of the position players they have in place. And yes, Trevor Lawrence has looked better in the last 3 games than he did in the first 4 or 5. But I just feel like the way that Minnesota's defense flies around and applies pressure, I feel like they're going to get to Trevor Lawrence, not only just with like getting him down for sacks, but they're going to cause him to force the ball into bad windows and throw some interceptions. I think this game is one of those ones where maybe the first quarter is close, but then it gets ugly afterwards, after a few defensive turnovers, maybe even a pick six or something like that. And then Minnesota definitely gets it clicking on offense. I don't think Jacksonville's defense has anything for Minnesota's offense, and I think that Minnesota's going to run away with this one, not only winning the game, but easily covering the 6.5 points. So that's why Minnesota is my lock of the week. And lastly, we got to get into my underdog pick of the week. Now, for my underdog pick of the week, I am going with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, the Buccaneers are at home against the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers are favored by 6.5 points, which is why this game qualifies for my underdog pick of the week, because Tampa Bay is favored to lose by more than 3 points. I think that, people not watching the games is why this spread is as big as it is. But if you watch the way that Tampa Bay played Kansas City and watch the way that San Francisco played Kansas City, it was 2 completely different games. Kansas City dominated the 49ers from jump. The game never was really in doubt. They controlled the game from start to finish, where with the Tampa Bay game, it was pretty much back and forth for the most part. Obviously, it did go in overtime, and the Chiefs won with their own drive, leading to a touchdown in overtime to win by 6 points. So I think, in a way, even though they lost, Tampa Bay is going to have more momentum going into this game, knowing that they just played the only undefeated team left in the league, and they played them tough on the road, to now come home and have San Francisco, who has to travel all the way across the country to play Tampa Bay. I think it lines up well for Tampa Bay to not only cover the 6.5 points, but I actually think they have a solid shot to get the win. So I'm picking Tampa Bay Bucks as my underdog pick of the week. So that's it for this week's episode. I want to thank you all again for tuning in. Please make sure you like and subscribe and share wherever possible. And I look forward to seeing you in the next episode. Peace.